There are moments in a universe of infinite timelines when reality itself seems to hold its breath. Moments when two forces so impossibly different collide that even the laws of physics hesitate, unsure of which one should break first. On a silent afternoon somewhere above Metropolis, the sky did exactly that. It trembled, not from a weapon, not from an alien armada, not from magic, but from a single man casually stepping through a tear in existence, looking as if he'd just gotten lost on his way to the grocery store, the first person to see him. Hovering, there wasn't a scientist or a soldier. It was Superman. And for the first time in a very long time, Clark Kent felt something cold tighten beneath his ribs. Not fear, but the ancient instinct of a warrior recognizing that the stranger standing across from him wasn't measurable, predictable, or even comparable. He was simply strength wrapped in boredom. And that was the moment the DC universe changed. The tear in the sky didn't roar open like the portal Superman was used to confronting. It didn't announce itself with lightning or demonic fire or the shrieking harmonics of an alien gateway. It simply unstitched, like a thread pulled from the fabric of a curtain, and for a heartbeat the world forgot what shape it was supposed to hold. The winds paused. The sunlight trembled, and high above the silver skyline of Metropolis, a single figure drifted forward from the widening seam of nothing, stepping onto the air with the weary gait of someone who had just finished a mundane errand. Superman reached the scene in less than the span of a breath, yet even he felt the strangeness settle into his bones. The man hovering there, bald, caped, unassuming, wore an expression so profoundly ordinary it became unsettling. His eyes didn't scan the world like a conqueror or a lost traveler. He simply looked around as though searching for a street sign, mildly disappointed he couldn't find it. Superman spoke first, voice steady but edged with a quiet vigilance as he floated before the stranger. "You're in Metropolis. My name is Superman. Are you injured? Do you know where you came from?" The bald man frowned at the horizon as if trying to remember. I was at the store. Or was I heading there?" He rubbed the back of his head, creating the impression of someone puzzled by a misplaced grocery list, not someone who had stepped through a cosmic fracture. "Anyway, I think I got lost." Superman's instincts rarely betrayed him, but now they whispered something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Uncertainty, not danger, not malice, just an absence of anything familiar. The stranger's heartbeat was normal, almost relaxed. His breathing steady, his muscles uncoiled, loose, at ease. Yet beneath that peaceful shell, there was a void and emptiness where limitations were supposed to be. Superman's senses slid across it like fingers against frosty glass. "What's your name?" he asked, not out of protocol, but out of a genuine need to anchor this moment to something human. "Oh, Saitama," the man replied. "I'm a hero, just for fun." The phrasing struck Superman like an offbeat chord. Heroes he understood, motivations he understood, but the simplicity in Saitama's voice felt impossible. In a universe carved by conflict and sacrifice, who claimed heroism as something casual? Below them, the city watched. Phones rose, windows opened, reports echoed through newsrooms and defense channels, carried by the uneasy tone all witnesses shared. Superman wasn't taking a defensive stance, but he wasn't relaxed either. Saitama tilted his head. "Hey, you're pretty strong, right?" The question landed with the weight of an unexpected confession. Superman didn't know why, but it felt less like curiosity and more like a man stranded on an island asking, with quiet desperation, if someone else could speak his language. "I do what I can," Superman answered carefully. Saitama's eyes narrowed with the smallest flicker of interest, the first real spark of emotion since he'd arrived. "That's good. I was hoping maybe someone around here could finally." A sudden ripple of displaced air cut him off. Superman saw it, felt it, understood it before anyone else could name it. The fabric of space behind Saitama sealed shut with a whispering snap, erasing whatever doorway had delivered him. He was now fully, undeniably, trapped in a universe that did not know how to contain him. Saitama exhaled. Yep, definitely lost. For the first time in years, Superman didn't know whether to feel relieved or afraid, and somewhere deep in Metropolis, the world held its breath again. Asterisk. Superman's gaze narrowed as he studied Saitama, noting the impossibly calm posture of a man who should, by all observable measures, be off balance, out of place, or at least frightened. Yet there was nothing. The air around him barely shifted. Even the faint gravitational tug that usually accompanied someone stepping through a dimensional tear was absent. It was as if the laws of physics themselves had hesitated, unsure of whether to touch him at all. Saitama yawned, stretching slightly in the wind, and glanced around the city with detached curiosity. Where should I start? Do I fight? Crime first or find a ramen shop? He shrugged. The casual tone jarred against the tension building in the skies above Metropolis, and even Superman felt a twinge of disbelief. Every hero, every villain, every cosmic anomaly he had faced arrived with force, fury, or an agenda. Saitama carried none of that. "Do you even know how to control yourself?" Superman asked, voice firm but careful. He had to gauge, to measure, to anticipate. The safety of millions might hinge on understanding what this man was capable of before the first collision. Saitama blinked slowly, tilting his head. "Control, I don't really try. I mean, I can punch pretty hard if I need to, but usually I just don't." His casual admission hung in the air, absurd and unsettling. For anyone else, it would have sounded like bravado. For Superman, it sounded like a warning the universe itself had whispered. This man cannot be measured. The city below stirred with unease. Workers froze on rooftops. Cars slowed in the streets. Children turned toward the sky, sensing the tension but unable to name its cause. All around, news signals and emergency channels buzzed with static, as though the infrastructure of information itself recognized that it could not contain the moment. Saitama's gaze wandered, landing on the faint outline of the Daily Planet. Globe spinning in the distance. "That's a cool ball," he said. "Do people live inside it?" Superman clenched his fists briefly. Words like that should be innocent, but when they fell from someone who might destroy worlds without effort, they were anything but. His mind raced, running through simulations of containment, strategies for subduing a being whose power was invisible until it manifested, each scenario collapsing under the absurd simplicity of Saitama's existence. The wind stirred again, carrying the scent of ozone and distant rain, and Superman could feel the tension in the molecules around them. A single wrong move here, one misjudged step, could leave the city unrecognizable. He exhaled, steadying himself against the rising tremor that emanated not from Saitama, but from the air that seemed to resist definition, as if reality itself were questioning its own rules. Saitama stretched again and yawned. So, you gonna fight me now or what? That simple question, stripped of threat, stripped of bravado, compressed time for Superman. It was impossible, absurd, dangerous. A fight here would not be about skill. It would be about grasping a truth the world might not be ready for. That power could exist without spectacle, without warning, without any of the signs history had taught the planet to fear. Superman's cape flickered in the sudden shift of wind as he floated closer, measuring, calculating. His eyes, sharp as sunlight on metal, studied Saitama's stance. Even now, he could not read intent. Nothing about the man telegraphed anything, and yet, somewhere deep in the core of the city, where instinct and heroism converged, Superman knew that the moment the first blow landed, nothing would ever be the same. The pause stretched, the air waited. Saitama blinked. Okay, then, let's see what you've got. Superman exhaled slowly, allowing the calm that had always defined him to settle back into place, though the unease beneath it remained sharp and insistent. He floated just above the street, cape rippling, eyes locked on Saitama. Around them, the city held its collective breath. Cars sat abandoned mid-intersection. Pedestrians froze mid-step. The hum of electricity along the skyline seemed to hesitate, as if the entire world recognized that it had stumbled into something unexplainable. Saitama tilted his head lazily. You gonna throw the first punch? Or are we just gonna stand here staring at each other all day? His tone was casual, almost bored, yet the words carried weight. Superman felt it as a tremor in the air, a subtle, invisible pull. It wasn't power in the traditional sense. There was no crackling energy, no flickering aura. It was certainty. Absolute and unyielding, radiating from a man who had no reason to prove anything. Yet could Superman consider the ethics, the responsibility? He had fought gods, monsters, tyrants, and tyrannical aliens. He had defended planets from the brink of annihilation. Yet here, he confronted a man whose strength defied measurement, whose indifference was a weapon as sharp as any blade. A hero without fear, a warrior without intention, and somehow, a force he could not predict. Then I guess this is happening, Superman said, voice calm, deliberate. He positioned himself, ready to act, aware that any miscalculation could shatter more than buildings. It could tear the very sense of safety Metropolis had taken for granted. Saitama flexed lazily, a small shrug of casual readiness. All right, don't hit too hard, okay? I'm just getting warmed up. Superman's fists clenched. The wind shifted around him, and the slightest tremor rolled through the air, as if the city itself were bracing for the inevitable. The first movement was a blur. Superman lunged, faster than human perception, faster than the blink of a camera lens. He aimed not to kill, not to injure, but to gauge the impossibility standing before him. Saitama tilted his head and caught the punch with the barest shift of his body, a slight step backward, almost apologetic in its simplicity. The air cracked like ice underfoot, a thunderclap tearing through the streets. But the man did not strain, did not flinch. He simply absorbed the force, dissipated it without effort, and blinked as though asking whether Superman was done. Superman's eyes widened not with surprise, but with a realization that he had underestimated the absolute nature of the power standing before him. This was not a challenge to fight. It was a confrontation with the truth that the universe had hidden behind ordinary skin. Around them, glass trembled in the windows of skyscrapers. Birds scattered from ledges. The faint hum of electricity screamed across the streets. And yet Saitama remained untouched, unbroken, entirely unimpressed. Superman hovered, chest heaving slightly. For the first time, he felt the gravity of responsibility differently knit, merely as a defender of a city, but as someone who now had to comprehend a force that could not be contained, measured, or predicted. Saitama yawned again, rubbing his neck. Well, that wasn't so bad. Thought it would be more exciting. Superman exhaled, a complex mixture of relief, tension, and awe, pressing down on him. He realized something fundamental. This man had arrived not to dominate, not to challenge, but to exist as a variable the universe had never accounted for. And in doing so, he had already changed everything. Above them, the clouds shifted. Sunlight fractured across steel and glass, and Metropolis waited for what would come next. The air above Metropolis quivered, not with the hum of a machine or the distant roar of alien engines, but with anticipation. Superman hovered, cape snapping in the rising wind, gaze locked on Saitama, who lounged with casual ease atop a steel beam jutting from the remains of a shattered rooftop. The city beneath seemed to shrink under the tension of two beings whose powers were no longer local, whose presence bent the very rules of perception. Even the smallest ripple of air felt charged with the potential to unravel everything the world had once understood about strength. Saitama yawned again, tilting his head as if deciding which way to look. So, this is your world, huh? Feels normal enough. A lot of buildings, people walking around, nothing too exciting. His voice carried no malice, but each word struck with the subtle weight of inevitability. Superman, trained to detect threats in the blink of an eye, felt that each syllable was a test he could not anticipate, a challenge presented without intention. You're powerful, Superman said cautiously, hovering closer. I need to know how far that extends. If your presence alone can destabilize space, we must proceed carefully. Saitama scratched the back of his head. Powerful, huh? I guess. I'm usually strong enough to handle things, but I don't really think about it too much. Just punch, problem solved. You don't need to worry too much. The casual tone should have been a relief. Instead, it sparked an edge of unease. Superman's eyes narrowed, scanning every minute detail, the posture, the breathing, the imperceptible ripple of air around Saitama. He had fought men and gods who wore their strength like banners. He had faced beings whose every heartbeat shook countenance. And yet, Saitama radiated nothing. He was nothing and everything at once. An enigma that refused containment. Superman adjusted his stance, hands hovering, ready to move. The first strike could not be a mistake. He calculated distance, speed, and angle, aware that even a minimal collision could leave the city in ruins. He didn't need to attack to gauge the strange every micro-movement of Saitama's body told a story of control far beyond ordinary comprehension. Yet to understand fully, to measure, action was necessary. Saitama's gaze finally met Superman's. A blank stare that somehow penetrated every calculation, every simulation, every assumption he carried about power and responsibility. You want to fight, or just stand there staring at each other? The words were casual, almost playful, but Superman felt the undercurrent, a certainty that nothing could truly challenge him, except perhaps the ethics and restraint of those who could. The first strike came without warning, swift as thought. Superman propelled himself forward, faster than the eye could track, a blur of blue and red hurtling through the air. His fist aimed to measure, to probe, to test the strange limits of Saitama's presence, collided with nothing. Saitama shifted almost lazily, a minor adjustment of posture that sent the impact sliding past without effect. The air screamed. In protest, a fracture of wind and sound that rattled windows and raised a chorus of alarms across the city. Superman hovered, stunned not by pain, but by clarity. This was not a conventional fight. It was not a contest of strength or skill. It was an encounter with an absolute, a force that existed beyond the usual metrics. Saitama had not even tried. He had simply reacted. And the universe had tilted slightly in acknowledgement. Saitama blinked, scratching his head. HM, that was a little stronger than usual. I guess you're serious about this. Superman's heart pounded in a strange rhythm, half anticipation, half awe. The first brush of collision had taught him something fundamental. Measuring power in the presence of Saitama was not about force. It was about understanding the unmeasurable. The city below trembled, silent witnesses frozen mid-duction, aware that history had tilted on its axis. And somewhere inside Superman, the realization burned. This was not just a fight. It was a revelation. The cityscape shivered under the weight of what was unfolding above it. Superman's cape fluttered violently in the sudden turbulence as he hovered, fists clenched, gaze locked on Saitama, who still moved with that uncanny calm, as if gravity, speed, and reaction all conspired to avoid noticing him. Metropolis had seen its share of cosmic threats, alien invaders, and gods with egos large enough to level blocks with a thought. None had carried this indifference. None had forced Superman to confront not aggression, but the void of measure, the blankness of true, effortless strength. Saitama yawned, leaning slightly on the edge of a crumbled skyscraper. Well, that first hit was okay, I guess. Thought it'd be more exciting. His words weren't dismissive. They were mundane, almost charmingly casual. But the juxtaposition made Superman tighten his jaw. Here was a man who could likely obliterate the planet with thoughtless force, yet who moved as if the stakes were a casual curiosity. Superman knew he couldn't gauge him by conventional methods. Every tactical simulation, every past encounter, every experience with beings far stronger than mortals had left him confident in now. He attempted another strike, slower this time, more deliberate, aiming to provoke, to test endurance. Saitama tilted his head and shifted a single step aside. The blow passed through empty air, the force dissipating harmlessly into nothingness, and a low hum of displaced energy radiated outward, unsettling the clouds and scattering birds in every cell. In every direction, the sound was deafening in its subtlety. Not an explosion, not a sonic boom. A vacuum of expectation, a void that marked where impact should have been. Superman exhaled, eyes narrowing. He had faced titanic forces before. He had known fear and anger and the thrill of overwhelming odds. But this This was a different calculation. A man who could laugh at effort. A being who embodied the principle that power was meaningless without desire. Saitama scratched the back of his head, tilting slightly, and added, "So, you're strong, huh? You're the type that trains, pushes yourself, tries to be better every day. Respect for that." He paused, glancing at the horizon. "But I don't think you're gonna kill me, right? Just making sure we're on the same page?" Superman's heart rate quickened. The casual tone, the almost playful assessment of his strength, it was alien. It carried no threat, yet it was a threat, because it meant the man before him understood his power fully, not with calculation or strategy, but by the simple certainty that Superman could not overcome him. "I'm not here to harm you, Superman," said carefully, "but I need to understand the limits of what I'm facing." His voice carried weight, but Saitama only nodded once, a movement so small it was nearly invisible. Then came the moment that fractured the space between them. Superman surged forward, faster than the wind, aiming a calculated strike at the center of mass. Saitama shifted, ever so slightly, and the force of Superman's attack seemed to evaporate, sliding past as if the laws of motion themselves had decided to yield. A shockwave rippled across the city, shattering windows, rattling distant structures. And yet the man stood entirely unscathed, expression unreadable. For the first time in decades, Superman felt not challenge, not threat, but awe. This was not merely strength, it was the embodiment of inevitability. Every simulation, every calculation, every defensive strategy collapsed under its weight. Saitama yawned again. That's more like it. Kind of fun, I guess." And in that simple acknowledgement, Superman realized the fight would not be conventional. It would not be about punches, or power, or victory. It would be about comprehension grappling with something beyond measure. The city trembled as Superman hovered, cape snapping violently against a wind that seemed to anticipate every motion of the two figures above it. Streets cleared in silence, cars abandoned mid-traffic, citizens frozen in mid-step, windows thrown open in awe and fear. Metropolis had weathered threats before, from galactic conquerors to rogue Kryptonians, but none of them moved like this. None so utterly detached from consequence. None so impossible to measure. Saitama stretched, nonchalant, the faintest glimmer of curiosity flickering across his face. "So, you're serious now?" he asked casually, shifting his weight on the edge of a fractured rooftop. "Don't get me wrong, you're strong. I can see it. But I was hoping this would feel more challenging." Superman's fists clenched at the thought. He was trained to anticipate, to calculate, to dominate tactical outcomes with precision. Yet here he faced an anomaly that defied prediction. Every strike, every movement, every breath of air between them dissolved expectations. Saitama's strength wasn't overwhelming. It was absolute, yet invisible until applied. It was an absence of tension, a quiet certainty that twisted logic. Around him, with careful timing, Superman struck again, aiming to gauge more than power to test reflexes, resilience, and reaction. The blow landed against air as Saitama stepped aside with an almost imperceptible motion. The city felt it, a subtle pulse through concrete, steel, and glass. A shockwave that rattled distant high-rises, but left the man untouched. Superman hovered, tension coiling, realization burning in his chest. This was no ordinary opponent. He had entered a confrontation with a force that refused to conform, that could not be measured by strength, speed, or experience. Saitama blinked, scratching his neck, unconcerned. "Not bad," he said lightly. "You're stronger than I expected, but that's it. Nothing exciting yet." The casual assessment landed like a hammer on Superman's calculated composure. Here was a man who could erase worlds with a single gesture, and he treated the clash as a mild inconvenience, a curiosity to entertain briefly before moving on. Superman's eyes narrowed, cape fluttering in the charged wind. The fight was no longer about force. It was about comprehension. He needed to understand the man before him, not to win, but to grasp the nature of a strength beyond measure. Every punch, every dodge, every subtle shift in air told a story he could not fully read. A story of certainty and indifference, restraint and impossibility. Saitama's expression softened slightly, almost reflective. "You know," he murmured, "you're the first person in a long time who made me actually try." He paused, looking out over the city with a faint smile. "Not that I've had to before." Superman felt the weight of the words settle in the core of his being. They weren't a threat, they were a recognition, acknowledgement of effort, when none had previously mattered. The fight had begun as a test, but in that acknowledgement, it became something else entirely. A connection, fleeting and incomprehensible, between two beings whose abilities were unimaginable and whose understanding of purpose was equally profound. The wind shifted again, carrying the faint scent of ozone and electricity. The city waited, breath held, as the forces lingered above, neither fully engaging, neither retreating. Superman knew the first clash was over, not with victory, not with defeat, but with comprehension. And in that understanding, the world changed. Imperceptibly yet irrevocably. Saitama yawned once more. "Well, that was interesting. Let's see what happens next." Superman exhaled, eyes scanning the horizon. He realized that this was only the beginning. The aftermath of the first clash left. The city suspended in a peculiar stillness. Metropolis had faced cataclysm before. Rogue, Kryptonians, cosmic invaders, alien armies, but nothing like this. Nothing that defied every measure, every prediction, every expectation. Superman hovered above the city, cape snapping in the wind, surveying the quiet streets below. Broken windows shimmered in the afternoon sun. Cars remained abandoned. People lingered, unsure whether to flee or stay. Eyes tracing the figures above, as if trying to read history itself in their movements. Saitama sat cross-legged on the edge of a rooftop, legs dangling over the side, expression as blank as ever. He hummed softly, idly swatting at a bird that had dared to fly too close. "This city's kind of peaceful," he said, voice casual, almost conversational, yet each word carried the weight of observation. "But I guess it's not really mine to say, right? Just visiting." Superman's gaze lingered on him, trying to penetrate the simplicity that cloaked something far more complex. He had faced gods and monsters who wore their power like armor. He had faced the weight of worlds in their hands. But Saitama's power was effortless, absolute, indifferent. It wasn't about spectacle or dominance. It was simply, there a quiet truth that could not be measured, catalogued, or controlled. The city below buzzed with rumors, whispers, and the nervous hum of untrained senses trying to comprehend something beyond comprehension. Governments debated containment protocols. Heroes and vigilantes speculated about the newcomers' origins. Even alien observers monitoring Earth from afar noted the anomaly. And yet, in the middle of it all, Saitama remained ordinary. Or as ordinary as a man capable of obliterating a planet could seem. Superman hovered closer, voice calm but firm. "Do you understand the effect your presence has?" Saitama shrugged. "Not really. I just exist. That's about it. If people freak out, I guess that's on them. I'm not trying to cause problems." He yawned, looking around as though scanning for a store or a place to eat. "It's not like I'm here to fight anyone." But Superman knew it wasn't that simple. Every hero carries responsibility. Every power carries weight. And in the presence of someone like Saitama, the familiar scales of duty felt useless. Here was a man whose existence alone rendered conventional measures irrelevant, whose abilities existed outside the framework of heroism as Superman had always known it. For the first time, Superman felt the burden of doubt pressing in, an unfamiliar sensation in a lifetime of certainty. How do you prepare for something that cannot be anticipated? How do you defend a world when the very concept of threat has shifted? Saitama yawned again. "So, you're thinking about what to do next? Don't overthink it. I'm not going anywhere. Well, unless I get bored." He rubbed the back of his neck, scanning the city below without urgency. Superman exhaled slowly, heart still racing from the previous clash. The realization settled deep in his chest. This wasn't a fight to win or lose. It was an encounter that demanded understanding, reflection, and restraint. Every citizen below, every hero above, every observer beyond, was witnessing a paradigm shift in action. Subtle yet undeniable, Saitama's calm presence highlighted Superman's own uncertainties. For all his strength, all his experience, all his understanding of power, he had never encountered someone whose abilities rendered effort meaningless and whose choices defined morality in a way that even the greatest hero could not quantify. Above the city, clouds parted slightly, sunlight glinting on steel and glass. The moment was suspended, delicate yet profound, as if the world itself were pausing to consider the meaning of strength, restraint, and purpose. Saitama tilted his head. "Well, when do we really start?"